Hi everyone, I'm Kalhari Jayaweera, one of the Spineless Wonders editors, and I'm here today with Tanya Vavilova, the author of Artichoke Hearts. Welcome, Tanya.
Thanks so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
Well, I guess we could start off with a big question that I've been wondering about. How did the idea of bathing in artichoke marinade come about?
I've always liked artichokes, and we actually have a lot of jars at home. And when other people were stocking up on pasta and toilet paper, we stocked up on dolmades and artichoke hearts. I really, really liked them. Um, and I'm not a planner in my writing, and so the image just occurred to me, the two women sharing a jar of artichokes. And then it just became, as stories do, it took on a life of its own and became stranger as I kept writing it. But I had no idea when I started that the women would have a bath of marinade, of artichoke marinade.
I think that's really interesting. So it sounds like the idea actually just emerged organically from what you were writing rather than being something that was planned. There was a little bit in the audio about the symbolism of artichokes having sort of like a tough exterior and a very tender interior. It sounds like that this was maybe subconscious in your writing and that it emerged organically rather than sort of being dictated by form. Is that sort of how it came about for you?
I wish that I had all of the knowledge about artichokes that and all of the facts that were presented in that audio. I mean, I knew that they were considered an aphrodisiac, and I love that about them. They're so sensual, and yes, there is this like rough exterior and something so soft and precious in the center. But beyond that, I didn't really have. There was nothing to the artichokes just just emerged really, and there wasn't really an intention behind the story. um, I wish there was, but it's just not the sort of writing that I do. Things just uh, crop up along the way and I embrace them. I don't think I've answered your question
No,
well.
you definitely did. I think it sounds like it just emerged as a beautiful metaphor for the piece. Um, I guess maybe we could turn to the relationship between Hannah and Felix, which is really the heart of the story. And it's such an interesting relationship because Hannah is the person that really helps Felix settle into the city. But at the same time, Hannah withholds a lot of herself from Felix and from the reader as well. And so in that way, it's sort of quite an unequal relationship. How did you sort of see Hannah in the story?
Mm. She was a force of nature, and swept she swept into Felix's life, and she also dictated the terms of their interactions to some degree. She kept things hidden. She turned up to the park when she could. There were some days when she couldn't show. She was the one that suggested the bar, and that was pre-planned, but I imagine that it was her idea, given that it was at her house.
Yeah.
um, and I guess Felix, being new to the city and being jobless and a little bit lost and lonely, was really open to this interaction with a stranger. And so, although Hannah led the way, Felix was happy to be swept along. And my one concession at the very end, it was deliberate that when the women were in the bath, that Felix was the one to pull the plug.
Oh, okay.
I kind of liked that she was exercising agency. The interaction was more on her terms, and she ended that encounter both literally but also metaphorically.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. And we do get a sense throughout the piece that there are these restrictions that are being placed on Hannah that we're not quite aware of. Like she has evidence of some scars on her wrists, and there's this sort of minder person, Dave, who is sort of hanging around as well. Actually, one of our reader questions was, what's Dave's role in the story?
Mm-hmm. What is his role? He's a constraint that Hannah has to work with, and I guess maybe they're probably they're partners, and they obviously live together, and for whatever reason Hannah is beholden to him, and there's definitely something dark there in their relationship. But I guess he's a constraint and something from Hannah's life external to Felix that she has to negotiate.
Yeah, I see.
Um, and so he's this, he's another menacing element in the story, in the same way that maybe the butcher bird is the butcher bird that impales the lizard. And so he's another element of darkness in this city that Felix is new to.
Yeah. And the city really kind of emerges as a character in its own right, in a way. I really love the way that you write about Sydney in this piece, and also in the other pieces in Grub. It's not the beachy sort of blue-skied city that we're used to reading about. It's much grittier. What do you think about Sydney potentially being a character almost in your stories?
Mm, I've always lived in cities, and I think that Sydney has so much to offer. You've got the sparkling harbour and you've got blue skies, but that's not what my day-to-day necessarily kind of looks like. And I'm interested in, I don't know, potholes in streets and shuttered shop fronts and unreliable electricity. I mean, maybe that's a bit dystopian, but I've always been interested in urban environments and landscapes, and they're close to my heart. And so I like the idea that the city in that story emerges as a character. I guess I hadn't thought of it that way, but I like reflecting on that. And I do enjoy stories where the environment becomes a character in its own right, like in Tim Winton's Cloud Street, the book that a lot of us studied at school.
Yeah.
That house that's divided in half between the pickles and the lambs. I mean, it is a force in its own right, and I love it when the physical environment has a personality and has these whims and idiosyncrasies and becomes part of the narrative itself.
Yeah, I see. Yeah. And I guess if we're talking about constraints, Hannah's got these sort of constraints in her life, but the constraint on Felix is almost the city in the way it's being in this new environment and being entirely unfamiliar. And by the end, through the process of the bath, they've sort of had this beautiful experience, which is also a little bit disgusting. But it's just, yeah, I mean, it's just a really great ending to the story, and you can sort of see the constraints on both of them being released by this moment.
Yeah, and they're brought together in this drizzly, lonely, tough city, and they're in this cozy, steamy
Yes.
space in the bath together. They're enveloped, and I don't know. I really like that they've found some solace and some connection in this mean, ugly city of theirs.
Yeah. So just turning a little bit to your writing process more generally, I think the readers might be quite interested in hearing a bit about it. We've got a few readers' questions as well. So it sounds like you don't really work from the basis of plot. It's more you write the characters and then you sort of see what happens to them. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so I don't. I'm not a planner, and I've heard people talk about there being two types of writers. There's the architect that has the scaffolding and then fills in the rooms of the house, and then you've got the gardener that plants the seed and sees what grows.
Right.
definitely of the latter. And I might start with an image, so something that I see out in the world and that gets stuck in my mind, and that's the basis for a story, and I have nothing else. It is just that image. So one of the stories in Grub called Car Park, all I had, which is about two young people who witnessed an act of violence from their balcony in the car park below. And all I had with that was this image, a hot summer day, sticky, hot metal outdoor furniture, and these kids smoking. And that's all I had. And so then the story kind of developed from there. Or it's something that someone's told me, a conversation that I've been part of, or something that I've overheard on the bus. That's often my starting point. And then I write the story from there. And I think it's probably a really inefficient way to write, because a lot of times the stories don't work out. They don't have enough legs. They don't have legs for you to keep going. But yes, normally it's an image or a snippet of conversation or something that I've observed, or an idea that's stuck in my mind. And then that's the starting point.
Right. I think that kind of makes sense, because often your narratives take such unusual turns that it's almost as if they can't be plotted in a way. It just kind of has to happen. So yeah, no, that's quite interesting. We have another reader question, which is how do you create suspense in a story? And the reader here is referring to a part in Artichoke Hearts where Felix is waiting for Hannah and Hannah doesn't arrive. Are there any specific techniques that you use for this?
Yeah, that is a good question. Part of it, I think, is maybe creating an ominous atmosphere and a sense of foreboding. And so I think in that particular case, it was like the inclement weather and being alone on the park bench and no one being around. And even the birds had disappeared somewhere else. And she's sitting there alone and vulnerable. And I think creating that ominous atmosphere is good for building suspense. Maybe also withholding some information from the characters and from the reader as well. So not everyone has all the information that they need in that moment. And so then you start to, there are so many things that could happen, so many directions that something could go. And I think you create that by maybe withholding some information. So Felix doesn't know whether Hannah will show, the reader doesn't know whether Hannah will show. It's drizzly, it's wet, the sky's overcast. Something bad is bound to happen, or something good, in case Hannah shows.
Yeah, and I think also at that point, we don't know very much about Hannah at that point, do we? So I guess there's also that sense of mystery with Hannah as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what other questions? I think we're almost at the end, actually. In terms of your general writing process, do you write? I mean, do you write every day? There's sort of that, you must write every day kind of thing. Do you follow that, or is it sort of when you have time? Or
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in turning up, showing up at your desk and just doing the work, even if it's not going well and even if you don't have much to give. I work part of the year. So I work as, it's very, very dull. So I work as a technical writer. So I get placed in different construction companies. And when the government drops a tender for a train station upgrade or a new wing of a hospital, I then go and work with a construction company and help write the non-commercial aspects of the tender. So it could be the construction methodology, or it could be a piece on stakeholder engagement or environmental impact. And so I do that, and I work full time on those contracts, and they could last as little as 6 weeks, or it could be 3 months. and they're long hours, but it pays quite well. And so what that means is that once a contract is over, that's my writing time.
Right.
So when I'm working on those tenders, I don't do any writing. I give myself kind of a free pass. And as soon as that contract ends and I've got a month or two off, that's when I write every day
Right.
in the mornings during the week. So I have, I basically replicate an office work day at home. So I try to start at 9 o'clock, and I use the Pomodoro method. So I work in 25-minute increments, because I find that, it seems to be something that works for a lot of writers. I think John Birmingham uses that technique,
Yeah.
and it really works for me because 25 minutes seems manageable. And so I work in 25-minute increments. So I work for 25 minutes, I have a little break, I work for 25 minutes, and I do that throughout the morning.
Yeah.
And then after lunch, that's for responding to emails, that's for admin, grant applications, competition entries, editing pieces for other people. And so basically it is just recreating what what an office day might look like for others. But writing in the morning, that's one thing that definitely works for me. And I just turn up and do it, even if the going's hard, and even if at the end of it I have nothing that I want to save or keep or go on with. I just make myself do it.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like it would make sense because you're freshest in the morning as well. So yeah. Thank you so much, Tanya. That was really insightful. And I'm hoping that all the readers were happy to hear about it too.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.